This presentation is about nouns and determiners. You already should have done the pretest on page 45. First, let's talk about nouns. There are two types of nouns, countable and uncountable. Countable nouns are nouns that can be counted, and all countable nouns have a plural form. So the examples for these are on page 47. There are different categories of countable nouns, but here are a few examples. Like foot is a countable noun. This is an irregular noun because it has an irregular plural, feet. Mouse is another example with an irregular plural, mice. Pencil is a regular plural, or a regular noun with a regular plural. You just add s to make a plural. Pencils. There are, one of the categories is academic count nouns that don't follow the usual rules for plurals. Some of the more common ones are like data. Data almost always appears in the plural. The singular is datum, and you hardly ever hear this. Analysis has an irregular plural, analyses. And then nucleus is another academic noun, and nuclei is the plural. These nouns all come from Greek or Latin, and the plurals are based on those languages. Uncountable nouns are also known as mass nouns, and these nouns cannot be counted and never appear in the plural, so they don't have plural forms. Some examples of these are on page 48. There are many different categories of these. Whole groups made up of individual parts, abstract nouns like concepts, materials, liquids, grains or particles, natural occurrences. Some examples, and you can look on the top of page 45 to see more categories, are like wood is a kind of material, and it's considered an uncountable noun. You don't say woods, but you can use a counter. You can say a piece of wood. Oxygen is another uncountable noun. You don't say oxygens. Happiness is uncountable. It's just a concept or emotion. And physics, even though it ends with S, is also an uncountable noun. A lot of areas of study like physics, linguistics, ethics, end in S but are uncountable nouns. And there are some types of nouns that can be either countable or uncountable. So you can have collective nouns like audience, family. Okay, so these contain many members, and sometimes when the audience or family does something together, then it's uncountable, like the family travels to Europe every summer. But if the members of the family are acting individually, then it's countable. So the family disagree about where to go next year. So each family member disagrees with other family members. So you use the plural verb. There are others like juice. Juice is usually an uncountable noun, but a company might sell juices, so different types of juice. Or tea. Tea is usually uncountable, but again, a company could sell teas, different types of tea. Beauty is another, it's a general concept, it's usually uncountable, but you can call someone a beauty and say that there are many beauties in the room. So there are different uses for the uncountable and then the countable version of each of these nouns. So at this point, please do self-check 1 on page 49, and it continues on to page 50. Please pause the video now. And here are the answers to self-check 1. Okay, the next topic is determiners, and one type of determiner is articles. Articles include the or a. Okay, and this little table, this little chart, which is on page 51, actually summarizes article usage very nicely. So if you're confused about when to use an article, when not to use an article, when to use the, when to use a, this little guide on page 51 is a good summary. So let's look at that first example. A computer with additional memory will perform quickly. So how do you know that you're supposed to use a in front of computer? Well, you look at a noun like computer, and then you determine if it's a count noun or uncountable. Computer is countable. And then you determine if it's singular or plural. Computer is singular. And to talk about a computer in general, you use a, or a specific computer, you use the. So this is just computers in general, or a computer in general, one of many computers. So you use a. And then the second sentence, an alternative energy source will soon replace fossil fuel. So alternative energy source of source is the noun. It's a count noun, and it's singular, and it's one of many energy sources. It's not clear which energy source, so you wouldn't use the. It's not a specific one, but it's one of many. So you use a, or in this case, an. The next sentence, the earthquake registered 7.1 on the Richter scale. Earthquake is a noun. It's a count noun. It's singular, and in this case it's a specific earthquake, the earthquake. The next sentence just demonstrates that nouns related to illnesses, some of them you need a noun, and some of them you need no noun, some of them you need a. So it follows no rules. This is actually on page 52, number 4. It gives you a list of the nouns having to do with illnesses that take the, or no article. So flu is one that is the flu. And then the last sentence is illustrating number 5 on page 52, which some countries include the article the, some don't. It just depends on the country. You don't always use the with names of countries. So Canada is in North America. You don't say the Canada is in North America. But United States, part of the name is the United States, so you use the in front of it. The next category of determiners are quantifiers and numbers. So quantifiers, this is on page 53. This is where this chart is from. And you can see that the chart is divided into singular count nouns, plural count nouns, uncountable nouns, and plural countable and uncountable nouns. So for count nouns, singular count nouns, you can use each, every, another, and one. So these are the quantifiers and numbers that you can use with singular count nouns. Plural count nouns, you can use each of, many or not many, many of the, a few, very few, several, a great number of, a great many, a couple of, both, and any number above 1. For example, 10. And then there's uncountable nouns. So for uncountable nouns, much traffic, not many traffic. So many is used for count nouns, plural count nouns. Much traffic, too much traffic, a little traffic, very little traffic, a great deal of traffic, a large amount of traffic, less traffic, none of the traffic. Okay, and then the last category is quantifiers and numbers that you can use with plural countable or uncountable nouns. So the categories 2 and 3, some quantifiers you can use with both of the categories. So some is one of those, a lot of, lots of, plenty of, a lack of, no, all, most of the, and other. Okay, so some of the sentences. The teenager spent a little money at the movies, therefore he had little money for dinner afterward. So a little means a small amount, and little, you're emphasizing the small amount of money he had. Many medical treatments are accepted overseas before they're used in the U.S. versus many of the medical treatments for cancer make patients sicker before they get better. The difference between many and many of the is many of the denotes specific medical treatments. Many medical treatments, that's just general. And then the last two sentences, much and much of the, much knowledge is required versus much of the knowledge. Again, general versus specific. The next category is demonstrative adjectives. This, that, these, those. So for count nouns in singular, this, that. Also this and that for uncountable nouns. And then for plural, these and those. So this classroom where we're standing is freezing cold, while that classroom down the hall is boiling hot. So this is for near in time or space. That is for distant in time or space. Plural, those students down the hall are comfortably hot, while these students in our classroom are very cold. So those is for distance, distant in time or space, and these is for near in time or space. And then for uncountable nouns, this current research is much more accurate than that older information. Okay, and then for possessives, this chart on page 56 summarizes how to use the possessive apostrophe. So for regular nouns, you add apostrophe s to singular nouns to mean possessive, and you add an s, or you add an apostrophe after the s for plural. So a student's book, singular, the student's books. Irregular nouns, you add apostrophe s for woman, singular, or women's, plural. If you have an s already at the end of the word, you can add only apostrophe, or you can add apostrophe s. It doesn't actually matter. So for singular, a genius's test score, or a genius's just apostrophe test score. An axe's handle, France's exports. Okay, so if the sound, the last sound is an S, but the letter's not an S, you have to add apostrophe S. And then for plural, you just add the apostrophe after the S. And then for words that end in SS, you can do the same thing. You can add apostrophe S or just apostrophe. And then for plural businesses, you add apostrophe. And then there are possessive adjectives like his, its, their. Okay. President Jimmy Carter started his nonprofit organization, the Carter Center, in 1982. The Carter Center accomplishes its mission with the help of many volunteers. President and Mrs. Carter work to accomplish their goal of ending human suffering by improving human rights. So possessive adjectives are also considered determiners. Okay, and then finally, numbers. Generally, for numbers above 10, either cardinal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or ordinal, first, second, third, fourth, spell out numbers above 10. I mean, actually, that should say numbers below 10. Spell them out. So 1 should just be, if you have 1, you should just have the word 1. 2, you should have the word 2. But 100, you can write the number 100. And then in ordinal numbers down there, 11th is spelled with the number 11 and then TH after it. So at this point, please pause the video and do self-check 2 on page 57. And here are the answers to self-check 2. You have now reached the end of the video.